A Carrot is a Carrot, selected readings by Zia Muhyiddin, moderated by Asif Faruqi. Please can I ask you to turn off all of your mobile phones. The session will last for 60 minutes and there will be a question and answer session at the end. Thank you. And can I welcome the speakers to the stage? Welcome the speakers to the stage.
No, Jaimuddin will come later.
Oh, he'll come, okay, all right.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. If I can have some degree of silence, then I would like to start the session. It's my very proud privilege to introduce Zia Muhyiddin Sahab, or probably not so much Zia Muhyiddin himself as the book that he's going to be reading from. Zia Muhyiddin, whom we all know, has recently published 2 books. The first is called A Carrot is a Carrot, and the second one is more about theatre. So I'm going to mention a little bit about A Carrot is a Carrot, and he'll be reading from this later on. A rose is a rose is a rose, wrote Gertrude Stein and became famous for having done so. If this circular sentence completes its sense with a rose being declared a rose 3 times over, then the carrot comes only 2 times in the title of Zia Muhyiddin's delightful collection of essays, which is subtitled Memories and Reflections. This particular carrot comes from Anton Chekhov and not Gertrude Stein. In the essay after which the book is named, Zia Muhyiddin says that life today is a carrot, and then explains this as a reference, if not a tribute, to the Russian master. You ask me what life is, Chekhov wrote to his wife just before his death. It is like asking what a carrot is. A carrot is a carrot and nothing more is known. End quote. Does anything more need be known? Suffice it to say that carrots are carrot and life is no different. However, it could have easily been a cucumber. In a Chekhov play, a governess takes out a cucumber from her pocket and starts munching it in the midst of an intense situation. So whether you prefer carrots or cucumbers, life is like this, within quotes. And Zia Muhyiddin gently reminds you that life and all such situations are Chekhovian. It is easy to see that Zia Muhyiddin has a great regard for Chekhov, and this probably stems from his interest in the theatre. He brings a sense of his larger-than-life presence to his readers. His photograph adorns the cover of the book and will not let you forget that it is written by an internationally acclaimed actor and director who, as the director of the National Academy of Performing Arts, is the force behind the revival of quality theatre in Karachi. He is no less known for his... I think this calls for a tremendous round of applause because of the service. Because of the service Zia Muhyiddin Sahab has done to theatre in Karachi. He is no less known for his brilliant rendition of choice extracts from the classical Urdu prose and poetry. While some readers are likely to approach this particular book because of these distinctions, others will add his distinct prose style to Zia Muhyiddin's many distinctions which are already well known. He likes to tell amazing stories of people from an era long gone, and he has mastered the craft of making his sentences elegant without being cumbersome. The brief introduction to the book catches the spirit of the pieces that follow. In a matter-of-fact manner entirely devoid of sentimentality, Muhyiddin starts reflecting on old photographs, wryly observing that the face is less lined than it is now, but gives no indication of what was going on inside me. I would also like to mention the very first piece in the book is titled Qusur, and if the title is not inviting, the opening sentence is. It is uncanny. The swirl of dead leaves pulled along by wind in the heat of the day reminds me of a Qusur, a small provincial town I have not visited since I was a schoolboy. What follows is very much like fiction, as it is evocative and made of the stuff of memories. There's an unforgettable encounter with a Dian. The mad woman in the neighborhood shrieks and utters unintelligible phrases. It is with affection and horror that the small town is recaptured. It is followed by a vivid portrait of Zia Muhyiddin's father, but as the writer moves on to London, there is a tantalizingly brief encounter with the poet Dylan Thomas. But the piece which stands out as really outstanding among many other outstanding pieces is about Leela Leen, the great Indian beauty who married David Lean. I will not even try to summarize what this beautiful piece, and I would invite all people to read it. This collection would have been worth its price only for this article, but I hesitate to pronounce such a verdict as there are no less important pieces on dance and music, and not forgetting Ludhiana. It is the dazzling delight of such writing which leaves me wishing for more and also wondering if Zia Muhyiddin will consider some extended writing in the vein of autobiography. So my wish remains the same. I'm going to ask Zia Muhyiddin Sahab now to read out a few extracts from the book that I've talked about, but I would also like to remind people that the book is available outside for sale, and at the end of the session, Zia Muhyiddin Sahab is going to be available for signing. So, with great pride and pleasure, I'm going to introduce Zia Muhyiddin Sahab now and invite him to come on the stage.
Excuse me, I'll have to put these papers in order. This is the first lectern that I have found which doesn't have a lip. And my papers are going to be doing that all the time. Which means, hello. Okay. Well, bear with me, please. This one should be towards the end. Okay. This piece is called To Cynthia from Her Cocker Spaniel. Please do not be confounded if there's no mention of Cynthia or her Cocker Spaniel, because I'm only going to read to you an abridged version of this piece. Most well-to-do homes in Pakistan have a lot of modcons, ornate ashtrays, excellent crystal, expensive crockery, beautiful rugs, hideous paintings, ornate lamps, but no books. I do not mean the obligatory Encyclopedia Britannica in a bookshelf provided by the publishers, but ordinary, real books. When I mention this casually in a speech delivered in Saginaw, Michigan, I drew a silent round of applause. The Americans who came to talk to me afterwards said that I had drawn an apt picture of many rich American homes. A few weeks later, that suave opinion maker Gore Vidal declared that Americans do not read much of anything these days. Reading, even amongst the brightest students, is dead, he wrote. Another major writer, Saul Bellow, predicted that the serious novel would be a marginal phenomenon soon. What Mr. Vidal would have said about our students, most of whom never read anything beyond the summarized version of their texts, it is not hard to imagine. In America, they still have libraries, and more, they have Barnes and Noble. The used books halls of Barnes and Nobles, one of the best laid out bookstores in the world, is where I like to spend as much time as possible when I'm in America. There are rows of inviting bookshelves that give way to alcoves, which are sitting areas with pedestal lamps and comfortable wing chairs. And though the color of the upholstery is somewhat faded, it is quite in keeping with the second-hand books. Unlike London, there are not many browsers at 10:30 in the morning. People have better things to do at 10:30. I gather a few books and settle down in a chair to run through them. After an hour or two, I feel a slight sense of guilt. I look around, but I never get an accusing look from any of the staff for not having bought anything. I know where this feeling of guilt stems from. It goes back to my childhood when my mother and my two elder sisters would drag me along to go shopping for dress material. We would arrive at a cloth shop, be made to sit down, plied with sweet fizzy drinks in spite of protest, and then time would stop. For hours the salesman would unroll bolt after bolt. Each fabric was touched, stroked, fingered, its merits discussed in whispers before the price was asked. The obsequious salesman would never mention the price, but smile and say, "Whatever you wish to pay, it is your own shop, Banji." But when coaxed, he would mention a figure which would cause hands to be raised to the mouth in deep shock. Looks of utter disbelief were exchanged between my mother and my sisters. After this dramatic interlude, my mother would make an offer which seemed to me to be absurdly, ridiculously low. The salesman would swear upon his grandmother's grave that the price he had quoted was rock bottom. In fact, it was below the actual cost price. But my mother would rise, sisters falling in tow. The salesman would implore her not to be hasty, but my mother would march off saying she would look elsewhere. We would walk out of the shop, leaving hundreds of yards of material, disarrayed material, bunched up. I would die 1,000 deaths. The only complete book I finished while sitting in the store's snug armchair was a volume called Writers Revealed, in which 8 contemporary writers talk about life, faith, and religion. Even as I write this piece, I chuckle over John Mortimer's memory of his father, an erudite, highly whimsical barrister. Mortimer began to write in order to have something to read to his father. He had turned blind. He never offered me any advice at all, says Mortimer, except for telling me that I should never smoke opium because Coleridge had smoked it and it had caused to have him terrible constipation. That was really the only bit of practical advice I can remember my father giving me. The computer may not be putting books out of business in America, but it certainly has reduced our libraries to a state of meaninglessness because they are dismally stocked and hopelessly ill-kept. Whenever there's any talk of books, people often say that in this age of internet, no one has time to read books anymore. I have actually heard some of our technocrats suggest seriously that what our libraries need is not books, but computers. Such thinking frightens me. How can there ever be a substitute for a book which you can read in a bus, lying in your bed, or sitting on a rock by the sea? A book allows you to explore your imagination as you interpret the author's intention. A book offers us refined delights of being a part of something much bigger than ourselves. It gives us the purified exhilaration of nuances and undertones and equivocacy and contrariety A book gives us imagination, and imagination is happiness. A few extracts from an essay called Your Deal, Partner. This one is dedicated to bridge players. I like to think that it was my purblind, incurable innocence that led me to say yes to 3 dinner guests who asked me in between port and cheese if I could be the 4th for bridge. It was pure bravado on my part, for I didn't know much about the game and only pretended that I understood the bidding. I made a hash of every hand. If they had been less civilized, they would have thrown me out after the first few deals, and that would have put an end to my twitching fascination for the game. Instead, they kept on saying, "Rotten luck, old man," and "hard cheese." This was way back in the 60s. I was the weekend guest of Phyllis and Louis Horter in their beautiful Hampstead home. The lovely Phyllis sulked a bit when I took leave of her. I had ruined her evening, she said. She had hoped that I would sit with her and give her a real lowdown on the theatrical world, rather than sitting down to boring old bridge. There are lots of people who find bridge to be a bore. I don't. I like its changing and shifting patterns. I like the sound of silent bells as they chime a nameless fandango in my head when I bring home an unmakeable contract, which is not very often since I am an ordinary player and still fall prey to the temptation of going for a finesse, which is gaining a trick by neutralizing a high card held by the defenders. Is there any game, indoor or outdoor, that causes such heated debate, such acrimony, such cantankerousness amongst friends? In the underworld, the bully boss threatens to slit throats and everyone quails. Nobody even winces when such threats are made after a hand has been misplayed. And yet, after raising their voices in anger, after screaming hoarse and fuming at the mouth, after swearing and cursing and thumping the table, the same 4 people get together the next week or the next day and begin another new session of bridge in the most jovial and amicable manner. No proverbial mother-in-law could stoop to the kind of bickering and sniggering that goes on when 4 people sit down to a game of bridge. The language heard in the Billingsgate fish market is chaste compared to utterances at a bridge table. The invectives which are bandied about and the imagery relating to human anatomy, culled on the spur of the moment, is a marvel to behold. Did you have the Queen of Spades, partner? The question is asked in icy politeness. Yes, I did. I think not. I think you chose to leave it behind in Mama's womb when you came out. The most apocryphal bridge story of the husband who pulled a gun and shot his partner, wife, because she failed to lead the suit he had bid, an unpardonable sin in a doubled contract, is often retold during a game, sometimes as a warning to the meek and thoughtless players. Incidentally, the judge acquitted the husband, so the story goes. He was a discerning bridge player himself. So if you do not wish to blow your domestic bliss, do not partner your wife. You partner someone else's wife, which is another way of blowing your domestic bliss. Bridge-playing married men end up in the doss house anyway. But in order to avoid absolute hell, they prefer not to play with women as regular partners. I'm not so sure that bridge is one of those rare competitive activities that reward age and wisdom, but I know that I will go on playing it even as I know that I will never get to the top. There are supposed to be 6 trillion bridge hands, and I know that I will never be able to see more than a few thousand. And of those that I'm likely to come across, I know that I will muff quite a few. But that is not going to put me off any more than the unnecessary tantrums thrown by those that I play with. I find bridge to be fascinating and fun, and when I am able to manipulate a squeeze so that the lowly deuce of clubs becomes a winner, it is an ecstatic feeling similar to having executed a perfect lob on the tennis court. Your deal, partner, you say, as you nonchalantly jot the score. A few extracts from a chapter on classicism. One of the reasons I refuse to be interviewed by newspapers or on television is that they always ask inane questions like, what is your favorite book? How is it possible for anyone to pinpoint a favorite book, or for that matter, a favorite film? You can nominate your favorite dish, which may be dal chawal, because you have a partiality for it. By nominating it, you wish to convey that given an option, you would rather have dal chawal than bangers and mash. But when you declare, let us say, Brothers Karamazov to be your favorite book, you are saying that given half a dozen books to read, you would rather read Brothers Karamazov. I am frequently dubbed as a classicist. I do not mind this, even though I know that the implication is that I belong to a breed conservative in taste, thoroughly insensitive to the modern endeavors, and blind to the wonders of the age of CD-ROMs. It speaks volumes for the anti-intellectual culture which has spread all around us, that the classics is regarded as something terribly old-fashioned, appreciated only by fuddy-duddies. What is classics? What is classicism? Why are these words so off-putting? The fault lies partly with our dictionaries, which tell you that it pertains to ancient Greek and Latin literature and art. I would like to submit that any creative work of the past, be it sculpture, painting, architecture, drama, poetry, which stimulates the depth of your imagination, is classics. Needless to say that all things ancient are not classics, just as classics do not necessarily belong to an ancient world. And so I find the Discobolus and the Parthenon and the stupas of Sanchi and Michelangelo and Shakespeare and Lope de Vegas and Ghalib and many other works of prose and poetry to be classics. Except for the environment in which we live today, the terms classics and classicism, when applied to anything from painting to music, from novel to drama, are normally terms of approval and admiration. The debates that classics initiate are only about which works of literature and art and drama are the very best. The Greek tragedy is one of the most common ways that classics first come to our notice. The story of Oedipus gave Freud a lifeline. He announced to the world that the working of the human psyche was largely rooted in the incest of Oedipus with his mother after killing his father. He gave us the term Oedipus complex, and a substantial part of the world has now come and looks upon all personal and familial entanglements in the light of Freudian terminology. Other terms such as narcissism, and Epicureanism, and Bacchanalia, and their interpretations have proliferated throughout the world. The Greek tragedies, classics already as far back as the 4th century BC, show us that unless there are norms and limits within a human society, the society must fight to maintain it, or else it will burst into chaos and ruination. From the time that they were written 2,500 years ago, these tragedies have been performed not only in Europe, but at places, far-flung places from Macedonia to Egypt. And why, you may well ask? What is the fascination of these plays that depict the implacability of the gods and the stubborn, sometimes justified defiance of the mortals? The answer is that they manifest the indomitable courage of men and women who choose death and destruction for their convictions. It is the human spirit that these tragedies glorify. The audience is ennobled through the process that we call today catharsis. After the fall of the Roman Empire, classicism more or less died. It was not until the Italian Renaissance, centuries later, that it made a reappearance. Renaissance classicism introduced a lot of new elements into European culture. What was considered to be classical was now more orderly, more structured. Trade and contact with Islamic cultures had a lot to do with it. The Muslims brought a flood of knowledge about and from the ancient Greeks, plus their own contribution to mathematics, geography, physics, medical sciences, logic, and celestial mechanics. The period also brought a revival of ancient art forms like the Greek tragedy. It is always worth bearing in mind that Shakespeare was a product of Renaissance classics. Classics are not just a highly scholastic 3-year course for a degree at Oxford or Cambridge. Classics is the calm restraint exercised over a savage and grisly world. The trouble is that we are always taught classics as high moral purpose, and this is what alienates us from the classics. Before I'm accused of being a wog, or more pejoratively, a westernized Oriental gentleman, which is what the term wog stands for, let me hasten to add that classicism is not the sole prerogative of the West. In art, as well as architecture, in poetry, in pottery, we have an enormous heritage of classics. In India, the Sanskrit drama established itself as a distinct art form about the same time, if not earlier, than the birth of Greek tragedy. It was a form in which the spoken word, poetry, heightened prose remained subservient to the music and dance, central to the dramatic concept. But the most lasting and enchanting classical art of the subcontinent is the rag-based music, which is still pursued with tremendous flourish. Our experience of classics is invariably influenced by those who have gone before us. We experience classics in the light of what previous generations have said, thought, and written about the ancient world. The classic cultures of Athens and Rome were themselves influenced by the Semitic and African cultures that were their neighbors. Part of the contemporary appeal of classics lies in the way that ancient writers confronted contradictions of their own world. In their works, we see them debating what we now call multiculturalism of their own societies. I'm often asked as to why I have only appeared in one or two movies made in Pakistan. Well, here's one reason. This is a piece titled, "The Hero Must Look Well Fed." We are a fat people. Nobody minds this. Fatness is a symbol of prosperity, well-being, status. Nearly all our august personalities are fat. Even our movie stars are fat, with large posteriors and well-rounded, shiny cheeks. Many years ago, I was cast to play the lead in a film to be made in Lahore. It was the first film for a director who had been a cameraman all his life, and he was anxious to do everything properly. He arranged for me to meet my leading lady well before the start of the film. We were meant to be engaged to each other in the movie, and it was vital that we liked each other, he said. The meeting was to take place in the actress's second-floor apartment in Karachi. The director and I arrived at 5 in the afternoon. The door was opened by a squint-eyed youth who took one look at us and scampered downstairs. Rumor had it that he was the leading lady's half-brother. The leading lady, now a star of many movies, had made her name in a television commercial in which a man sang his desire for a cup of tea. A girl, our leading lady, appeared, crinkled her nose, pouted a little, and coquettishly suggested a certain brand. The crinkling of the nose and the alluring smile that accompanied it had shot her into stardom. She was bulkier than I imagined. Dressed in bell-bottoms, very popular at the time, she had painted her nails on top of last week's paint. There are very few sights more off-putting for me than a woman's hands with corrugated layers of nail polish. Coyly, she introduced me to her mother, who was sitting at one end of a long settee. The mother paid scant attention to me, but beamed at the director, who called her Mummy. I sat down awkwardly in a corner. The director, noticing my reticence, turned to Mummy and began to praise me, which added to my discomfiture. After a while, he turned to me and came out with some well-chosen phrases in praise of Mummy's daughter. Mummy's bovine expression never changed. I thought he was going overboard. Tea arrived. There was a wide assortment of Eastern and Western confectionery. The director took a few pieces on his plate. I was offered some. My food habits were stricter in those days. I refused politely. The director, who had by now decided to play the matchmaker, began a new game. "You must make him eat something," he coaxed the leading lady. Then he got up, picked a plate, placed a pera, a sickeningly sweet marzipan without almonds, on it, and gave it to her, saying, "Let us see if he spurns your offer." She approached me, held the pera between her fingers, and pouted in the manner of her tea commercial. I declined, murmuring something about having had a rather heavy lunch. "Maybe he does not like our local sweets," she said, and put it in her own mouth. I was then offered a piece of pink cake with crusty sugar icing. "No, thank you," I said for the umpteenth time. Mummy, or Mummy, I should say, who had been guzzling contentedly, suddenly shrieked, "Thank you, kya karta hai? Khana, khana." Stop saying thank you and eat. The game went on. She would hold a cookie or a nougat, crinkle her nose, wait for my refusal, and then eat it herself. I should not eat so much, she said to the director flirtatiously. From tomorrow I shall go on a diet. Mummy, a mass of misshapen flesh, weighing about 197 pounds, chuckled like a cockatoo. She had the kind of voice you could cut a piece of hardened cheese with. It saddened me to note that it wouldn't be long before our leading lady became as gross as her mother. When we left the apartment, eventually, I said to the director, she really ought to shed a few pounds, don't you think? Oh, she's all right, he said. And then hesitatingly, as though not to offend me, he continued, I think you should fill yourself up a bit. The hero must look well-fed. The actual words he used were, "Aap kuch jaan shaan banaएं." Shall I go on? The bridal suite. I have been in all kinds of dressing rooms, rich, plush, luxurious, with attached bathrooms, as well as cold, drafty cubbyholes. I have been in dressing rooms where the hot water pipes hissed and spattered, making the room unbearably hot, and the window so jammed you couldn't open it. And once, in the now extinct Theatre Royal Streatham, a barn of a place, a dressing room which had no heating in winter. I have had dressing rooms with an embossed hexagonal sign of the star in gold or silver stuck on the door, and I've been in makeshift shacks where an oilskin curtain served the purpose of a door, but I have never ever been given the bridal suite as a dressing room. Until recently, that is. At least that's what it was called. On my visit to New York to make an appearance at a charity function organized by the well-heeled ladies of Pakistani origin, I was given the bridal suite. It was not very bridal, and it wasn't a suite really, but it had mirrors on three sides, and it happened to be situated at one end of a small corridor that led to the ladies' powder room. Needless to say, every few minutes the door was given a push, and 1, 2, or 3 ladies entered, and gasping or blushing or both, murmured apologies before withdrawing. One lady, after struggling with the door for a while, gave it a severe push, shrieked, and flung herself back like a scalded cat. This was too much for my nerves. The door could not be bolted from inside. It could only be locked from the outside. I walked out hoping to draw the attention of the management, but I could not spot anyone and had to retreat. A dressing room is a place where you contemplate your navel or your ingrowing toenail or the widening gap between your upper teeth. It is in a dressing room that you give the old rib cage a heave-ho and grimace uncontrollably. The privacy of a dressing room is inviolable. Technically, it's also a place where you comb your hair, and if you are playing the Jew of Malta, apply grease paint, false whiskers, etc. I stood for a while in an impersonation of Groucho Marx, feet apart, holding my imaginary galluses, shouting, "Wrong room," as the door handle made a clicking noise, but it only led to confusion. "Someone's in there," I heard a voice. "A man." "What?" said another voice. "What is he doing in there?" And then defiantly, the door was pushed open. 2 ladies stood there, horrified, hands covering their mouths, as though I had barged in to invade their privacy. I was reminded of a cartoon I had once seen in the New Yorker, a lugubrious looking window cleaner on a ladder, cleaning the outer windows, spots a woman in a bath who is simply aghast at this intrusion. The caption reads, "Madam, I don't like being stared at." The situation was not entirely dissimilar. Then, as recognition dawned on their faces, one of them ventured to say, "Oh, you are going to be in there." "Well, it is the bridal suite," I said. "Where else would the bride be?" They looked at the door and the golden ornate letters that confirmed what I had said. By now, they had composed themselves. "We are sorry, so sorry. Is there anything we can do? We can get you something? Food? Tea?" "No, thank you," I murmured. "Well, sorry once again," and they withdrew. They were gorgeous looking. The dressing room had a truncated chaise lounge. You couldn't stretch upon it properly, but if you draped your legs over the upright arm, you could imagine yourself to be in a recumbent position. I had barely settled down when a slightly overdressed woman in turquoise stepped in gingerly. "Can I come in?" she said demurely. I waved an arm to suggest that she already had. She fidgeted a bit before asking me if I'd mind being photographed. Her friend was outside with a camera, and it would only take a minute. So much for the inviolability of a dressing room. The friend was in like a shot, all smiles. A quick photo session was held, and the lady with the camera left. The lady with the camera left, but the turquoise lady, now less fidgety, sat herself down. "I would like to ask you one or two questions." "Oh, God." She said, "I could never imagine I would ever get to see you like this." I said I was flattered, but this was neither the time nor the occasion for an interview. "Oh, you don't want to talk, is that it?" She got up to leave. As a parting shot, she said, "I never thought you would be so standoffish." She left rather huffily, I thought. The door remained unlocked. I shut my eyes. From now on, let them all come in. I would pretend to be asleep. Normally, before going onto the stage, I nearly always try to recall lines which are inconsequential, like, "Papa loved Mama, Mama loved men. Mama's in the graveyard, Papa's in the pen." I wasn't able to indulge in any of these quirks that evening. The shock of having shocked so many ladies was pretty unnerving. I will say this much, though. Not everyone's jaw dropped on entering my bridal suite. And another thing, I have rarely been visited by such a large number of exquisite-looking women in my dressing room. You've already heard Mr. Farrukhi explain to you about the carrot, but quite a few people have been intrigued by the title of my book, and many of my well-wishers have asked why I have chosen this title. So here is the answer. The past clings to us sticky as glue. Traditions, customs. Why do we go to a shrine and touch the ground with our forehead? Why do we fast on certain days? Why do handmaidens carry oil lamps to a shrine or prepare henna paste a night or two before a wedding? It is the custom, the tradition. No further explanation is required. It has always been so. It must continue to be so. What will happen if there is a break in that tradition? Things too terrible to be named. The downfall of the family, of religion, of the fabric of society itself. But the past of traditions and customs has not remained unaffected by the upheavals of the present. Would that it were so. Indeed, it has lost its dignity and repose. The walls and boundaries of our monuments are plastered with cinema posters and loud pronouncements of quacks who guarantee to restore your lost youth. Almost every street has pools of putrid water. Around them, people sit, talk, make deals, sigh, belch, pick their noses, and gleefully rub the skin off their big toes. Eliot sums it up nicely. The lot of man is ceaseless labor of ceaseless idleness. I believe in the past and the creations that derive from the past. I have to ferry much old stuff across the river. By old stuff, I do not mean just books and pictures and music, but the capacity to enjoy and understand them. If this capacity is lost, the books, etc., will sink down to museums and die. But what have I got? Roughly speaking, a little knowledge about books, pictures, tunes, and a little skill in their interpretation. I inherit a tradition which has lasted a little more than 3,000 years. And yet, those I come across do not want to have anything to do with this tradition. Ought I to disturb their preoccupation and say, Pyro de la Francesca and Sophocles and Proust and Mir Taqi Mir await you? People today are either indifferent to the aesthetic products of the past, or else they are suspicious of them. Who am I that I should worry them? Out of date myself, I like out-of-date things, and am willing to pass out of focus in their company. In my work, which I undertake to transcend my own inadequacies, reading, interpreting, projecting other people's thoughts, I keep making forays into the past. In a way, it is a monument to the past. Now, a monument suggests a gravestone, cold and mute. I like to think that it reflects the play of sunlight and rain. I do not mean to imply that I want my effort to be considered as an unreserved paean of praise for the past, and that I regard modernism to be destructive of the old traditional culture. The old traditional culture was full of cruelties and injustices, but it was a pattern of life known and understood, and therefore more acceptable and more fitting than the hybrid culture which is now being foisted upon us, a culture which has neither been fully understood nor assimilated. I have an inherent, instinctive love for the past. For me, the past is concrete, physical, and palpable. It is not all repression and internecine struggles and the subdued social status of women. The past for me is beautiful gardens laid out with symmetry and order. The past is musical soirees of extreme refinement. The past is nimble-witted symposiums on logic and scintillating conversations on aesthetics. In our past, you talked with your friend late into the night and then walked him home. He, your friend, returned your courtesy and walked with you all the way back to your home. The distances were not too large. And you once again accompanied him all the way, and so the night wore on until the early morning was heralded by the muezzin, whereupon you parted. An absurd, laughable ritual, you might say, but it symbolized graciousness of which we are devoid today. What we have today is life shorn of the past and unheedful of the future. Life today is a carrot. You ask me what life is, Chekhov wrote to his wife just a few days before his death. It's like asking what a carrot is. A carrot is a carrot, and nothing more is known. I thank you very much.